Hello and welcome to Property Matters, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. You can find this weekly property show live every Sunday at propertymatterstv.co.uk or by searching Property Matters TV in YouTube or Facebook. Whenever or wherever you're enjoying the show, please get involved with the comments section below, and we have an email address as well, hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. You can also get the show every Monday at 10 a.m. on a podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from, and the list of those are on the screen there now. So let's take a look at this week's news with our property expert, Joe Joshi. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everybody. As always, plenty to talk about in the property world. There's a mixed bag of goodies that I'm sure Paul will throw at me, and as always, test my knowledge as to where we should be doing and what we should be doing within the property world.
Yeah, we're talking about home upgrades this week. We're off the political agenda this week after last week's fairly full-on debate. However, we're talking about what you can do to your property and what you can't do to your property to make the price go up. So home cinemas, loft conversions and solar panels are among the home improvements that reduce the sale income potential of a property by as much as $12,300, according to the property maintenance company Help Me Fix. Sellers should instead invest in a garage conversion, build a garden office or create open plan living if they plan to boost the sale price. Removing a bath, for example, and replacing it with a standalone shower in the family bathroom costs £2,765 to do. However, it's thought that actually it would reduce the home value by as much as 2%, bringing an income reduction on the average home of £8,683. However, a garage conversion can increase sale profit by £15,840, building a garden office boosts the profit by just over £12,000, and creating open plan living puts an extra 10 grand in the seller's pocket around about. So it's interesting, isn't it, Joe? Because home cinemas, well, I kind of guess that's an obvious one, isn't it? Because that's a very specific use for the room. But loft conversions and solar panels are the ones that can reduce the property. I'm surprised at loft conversions.
Well, I mean, it's all about how they're done, I think, Paul. That's what really sort of matters in this. Loft conversions, in my journey, I have seen a myriad of loft conversions. A ladder up to the loft with a loft which has been boarded out theoretically could conjure up a loft conversion. A Velux window, as opposed to maybe a dormer window, conjures up the image of a loft conversion. Those amazing watch your step spiral staircases that if you actually miss the synchronization of your step, you are likely to come down them like a little, a deck of cards, I suppose, and damage yourself. Conjures up a loft conversion because you managed to put some Meccano set staircase up to the loft, which you only go up there with your life in your hand with, and if you miss the step, it's up. So it's quite interesting, isn't it, really, what people would see as a loft conversion. But a loft conversion that adds value is a loft conversion that is done correctly, and that is definitely not going to be done in the price range that perhaps one normally thinks that it could happen. The other thing about loft conversions, of course, is that it's all very well saying that it's a loft conversion, but if it's not done and supported correctly, you are going to create a damage to the actual infrastructure or the structure of the property, because the rafters that are up there. So some people, I've been through lofts, many lofts, and they take out the supporting rafters because it's kind of obtrusive, it's in the way. But what they don't realize is they've actually now weakened the actual position of the roof that is being held together, and subsequently it starts to bow. But it's one of those DIY situations. Well, it's not really doing anything, so why don't we just chop it out of the way, and we won't have to bump our head on it or something like that. So there's a whole bunch of things about loft conversion, but a proper loft conversion will cost you quite a bit of money. I would think that you are looking at anything between 30 to 50,000 pounds in order to do it. Then it will add value, of course, because it's a proper useful room. Loft conversions are also, for someone like yourself, Paul, who is very tall, is not going to find it very easy to be in a loft conversion, because that loft might actually not be a high pitched area where you're actually even going to be able to stand up straight, let alone get into it in the right way. So, a good loft conversion would add tremendous value to a property, but that loft conversion is going to be circa 50 odd thousand pounds. And the other thing that you've got to bear in mind when people do loft conversions, I'm going to go on about this for a bit, so sorry about that, is that the whole of the house from top to bottom is going to require updating, because to get to the loft, you're not actually going to take the loft roof off and then do it. You're actually going to end up going through the house. And as you go through the house, you are going to, your builders, your developers, whoever you're going to employ, with all the best will in the world, are going to put scuff marks, scratches, bashes, walls, all the way through. And isn't it ironic that when a loft has been done nicely, amazingly, the rest of the house now looks really rubbish, because the architraves that are painted, the staircase that looks nice, going up to the thing, and the rest of the house then starts looking a bit dated. So you start thinking, oh, I'll do this. And so the next thing you know is you've got a whole house being at least painted and redecorated, which normally means that the flooring's got to be changed, and then maybe the carpets have got to be changed because they're ruined by going up and down them in the first place, and so forth. So think very carefully, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say in terms of when you're talking about a loft conversion. And people in the marketplace flippantly say a loft conversion will add or detract from the value. It would add a good value if it was done properly, so it's useful. And of course, it's going to detract if it's done badly. And it's just what, like I said earlier on, one of those where you got a loft ladder, you pull down with a hatch, and that becomes your little study or something where you can go and put your desk and chair up and sit in the top. And of course, you will also, when it's hot, really, really boil up the top there, because it's like a sauna, because it's heat rises and it's up the top there. But of course, lofts are not often lagged and insulated well, and that's probably where you would save money and add value if those things were done correctly. Sorry about that lost bit, but you asked the wrong question.
No, it's interesting because I'm still not sure if you're in favour or not, I suppose.
Well, I am. I'm in favour of lofts, providing they are done correctly and they add value. At the end of the day, I'm always about adding value and doing the right thing. But if you're going to do a half a job, then don't do it at all, because you're now nowhere, and you can't call it a loft conversion.
I suppose there is some ambiguity there, because you could do a loft conversion that is actually for the purpose of doing a home office. So here it's saying that the loft conversion is likely to lose you money, but the office is going to add money. So wonder where that leaves us.
Exactly. And then you say, we'll go on to the next point, which you're going to bring up in a minute. But then you're going to reduce, or you can add. So I think an office space in the garden, one of these which you can buy in one of your garden centres and have done properly, is probably much, much better and perhaps more useful than a possible loft conversion.
Interesting to see garage conversion come up, and it was a huge and very popular thing many years ago, but hasn't appeared on any of the sort of top 20 lists of must-dos to your homes for a long, long time. And it's an interesting one for me, because the property I own, I've got 2 car parking spaces out the front and a garage. So I'm thinking, would that be a good thing to do? Because there's still 2 parking spaces outside, but the garage currently at the moment is just full of junk. And the question then after that is, what do you do with the junk?
Well,
especially if you've converted the loft as well.
That's the point I was coming to next. So yes, I think first and foremost, garages are often full of junk. The reason why the garages exist, just to sort of rewind the tape a little bit, is it forms part of the parking facilities that you have for your property. So when you're actually turning the garage into a room, that you are diminishing a parking possibility. That means that your road that you live in is now going to have more cars parked in the road, or halfway on the footpath and halfway on the road. And subsequently, the exterior appearance of your property is going to be something that, as you know, I'm a very great lover of making sure the exterior is attractive. But if you then come to visit that property and you're potentially perhaps one day thinking about selling it, and find that you are actually going to be ducking and diving a million cars, half parked, half this way, half that way, that is a deciding factor for you to think to yourself, well, actually, I can't live here. You know, I've got 4 children who've all got cars. If they're all parked up here, what am I going to do? It's not going to happen. So you just drive on and think, I'll go somewhere else. So by converting an existing garage, I'm not saying you're using it, but it should be used for a car, but it does add and detract value. It depends how it's done. If it's not tastefully done, I mean, I've seen garage conversions where the garage door still exists. And so from the outside, it looks as if you've got a garage there, but actually inside they have converted it. So that storage, junk storage area is actually quite nicely done, maybe as an office and so forth. On the other side of the coin, they do put some windows in there, but of course, the minute you do that, you are required to get some sort of planning permission to make sure that you are able to convert that. Now, if you go down the route of planning permission to get that done, then the likelihood is that you may not get the planning permission because you've now told the authority of what you're thinking of doing, which is why a lot of people leave the garage door looking like a garage door and start petition the inside of it and convert it into a habitable room overlooking the back, so that there's no reason for them to ask for planning. So you could always reinstate the garage if you're selling and it causes a problem. So garage space is there, but of course, as you say, where does the junk go? So it can either go into the loft, which if you may not have converted, and of course, or you can put another shed in the garden. And if you've already got a stamp-sized garden, to add another shed in the garden to fill up with all the junk out of the garage, which you've got to convert into a room. We have a limited space. It's all designed in that way. Now, the older properties are the ones that always have the massive benefits. Why do they have that? Well, normally they've got a reasonable sized garden, so you don't really feel that you've lost a lot of garden if you've stuck a garden office towards the back or to the side of the property. But in a modern property, they are built to max. They are absolutely to the brim. So the chances of you actually adding a lot to it is very, very slim. And therefore, what's going to happen is you're going to end up moving, and then you've got to work out the cost of moving and so forth.
I suppose, Joe, you could actually put a stud wall in perhaps a third of the way back into the garage, just past where the up and over door goes into, and then you'll get a reasonable size room for like a TV room or maybe even a home office.
Yeah, in fact, you can have the best of both worlds at that point, Paul, because you can have the storage for your garden tools at the front of the house where the up and over door still works. And then you've got, rather than a junk room, you've actually got yourself a useful room that you can either use as a study or a games room or a TV room. And then also it opens straight back onto the garden. So that makes it a little bit more like a garden room if you want to do as well.
But what you're actually saying is as soon as you brick up that front garage door and you start putting windows in the frontage there, that's when you've got to go and see the council.
Yes, you're always going to get someone say, oh, that's not what it's supposed to be. So part of the reason people do the petitioning inside is it just avoids that issue. And also because it's not a permanent thing, if at any one time the council were to turn around and say, well, look, you haven't met with building regulations or it's not compliant to planning, etc., it's a temporary thing, you can take it out. It's when it becomes something permanent that they actually start to make an issue. So if you turn around and put a front door and a window in there, then yes, what they're going to say is two things. One thing is that it needs planning permission and building regulation, and two, how is this being used? Because sometimes people have turned those garages into a little annex or a lettable studio and theoretically it might be deemed as another residential property that is being used. So therefore, you could be liable for separate council tax, etc., as well.
So they basically want to know what's going on. Is it a contentious issue for councils? Because you see a lot of them as you drive around, don't you?
It is, and it's a bit of a silly thing to have, really. One is that you need the space, and so you do what you've got to do to get the space. The second is to get the space correctly, you need to go through the planning authority, and then someone at the planning authority is likely to turn around and say it doesn't meet our regulations, so you can't have it. So that then means that you've highlighted the fact that you're thinking about doing that, and the minute you do anything of that sort, or somebody reports that you've done it, you then get into hot water legally and so forth. So it's a real fine line as to what you should or shouldn't do. But the answer to the question is yes, you should do it correctly with the appropriate planning permission and the authority. But the authority and the planning permission actually makes you want to do it perhaps illegally, because it actually causes you a problem by doing it right.
So if you went to the council and they had a problem with you doing that conversion, would you still be able to then just put a stud wall behind the garage door and no windows in, obviously, and just have an access from internally? Would you be able to do that?
Well, it's a risk factor at that point, because someone, let's say one of your neighbors that you fall out with, has visited you and they've seen what you've done on the inside, and half the it's the old adage, you keep your friends closer, you keep your enemies even closer. And the people that actually are going to shop on you are the people that you fall out with, and it might be over a garden fence, and all of a sudden they're the ones that are going to go and say, well, actually, 29 Acacia Avenue, they've got a garage showing at the front, but I've been there for a coffee and I fell out with a lady, and they've actually turned it into a room, and so someone's going to squeal about it somewhere. So sometimes it's better, not to highlight it, and that's what most people tend to do. But if you do highlight it, then beware that it may come and bite you on the bottom a bit later on.
They say home cinemas cost around £15,000 to install, but only add 0.9% to the value of the house, so just over 2,500. Here they've got some figures on loft conversions. They say that in urban areas they're particularly popular because, as you've said, you can only go up or down in crowded areas. 37,500 they estimate for a loft conversion, and that adds 10.8% to the value of the property, so resulting in a 5,500 decline in sale profit. Also, your favourite, the solar panels, which will only really give you a return if you're going to stay in the property for a good length of time. They can result in decent energy price savings. However, in the short term, they add little to the property's value, 0.5%, and thus result in a 4,400 reduction in sale profit. But talking about they also say, by the way, things like smaller, more basic improvements like new boiler, fixing the roof, or double glazing upgrade, that kind of thing would probably be more sensible.
Yes, I mean, things that are practical and are actually going to give you a better, feel for your home. Things like double glazing, a new boiler, proper central heating system, operative. All of those things are going to give you a better feeling. When people are buying, they want to know those are the basic costs. They are the things that you need to deal with. So what you have to sort of take on board is that the stuff that doesn't matter a great deal and is a long-term thing is things like the solar panels. I mean, like I said before, that it takes a long time to get a return on them. Apart from them being completely ugly, they are also just not something that brings value to the house.
Let's just say I'm thinking about converting the garage to a room, and I've obviously got to go and speak to someone who's going to be the architect who's going to do all the planning, do all the design for me, and that side, he'll advise on whether I need to go and get planning permission or whatever. But who is the person that turns around to me and says to me, right, okay, if you do this, you're going to lose this much on the property, or if you do this instead, you'll make this much? Is that what the architect's able to help you with, or do you go and speak to an agent?
In all honesty, it would really have to be your local agent, especially an established one who understands what the requirements are for people that are looking for property in that area. People are often, not complimentary of their agents, but they are the people that are right on the button with these things. They know that when people are coming to them, the kind of requirements that they have and what those requirements are going to fit. An architect is there because he is the one that's going to be able to put the actual infrastructure, the measurements, the drawings that are compliant to whatever the council's requirements are and so forth. So, and he would put in or put forward those things that are going to fit within that given area. Um, Cannot say that they are an authority of what is going to add value, what isn't. Fundamentally, their job is that, if you give them a bit of space, they'll say, okay, well, within that space, I can do X based on the current requirements or the conditions that are provided by the council. Where an agent will go in there and say, well, look, actually, because there's a good school nearby, or there's a good train station nearby, or these things, and the kind of people that want to buy this particular property are going to need maybe a study area. They're going to look at maybe the loft room converted, possibly even for maybe a member of staff, like a nanny or something like that. So it's all of those things that will do. But an agent will know the kind of people that are going to show interest in those particular areas, and what things done to those properties are actually going to add value to those properties.
And our old friend Open Living, many people have said, oh, that's the one big thing that everybody wants. I think we had it in a program just recently, something like 60 or 70%, something around there, of people look for open plan living when they're looking to buy your home. And we are in a buyer's market now, so this is really to help the sellers to maximize the money they're going to get in tough times as we're going forward. That's going to be the case. So what about this open plan living then, Joe? So if you've got that kitchen, and you maybe even got one of those little hatches that you used to open to serve your dinners through to the dining room. Do you remember those?
Oh my God, you're going back some time now.
Yeah. So if you're still in that situation, what are you going to do about open plan, and what sort of return have you seen, and when have you seen it done well, and when have you seen the pitfalls?
So open plan, in my opinion, is not a particularly good idea, especially with a number of things that have changed in recent years. So if we go back a couple of years, a pandemic brought in the situation that we weren't all going to work, so we needed to work from home. And if you have an open plan and you have a couple of kids that are in the same room and the kitchen is open plan, cooking is going on, what is the likelihood of you actually being on a successful Zoom call without Nelly or Neddy or whatever to come down and say, Dad, I want to do this, and the indoors shouts and says, I've told you not to do such and such, and blah 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 blah. And so that's open plan living, and that's when you sort of wish that there were walls back up and you could shut the door and even close the hatch, so that you can't get served your tea and toast whilst you're in the middle of a Zoom call. So I think going back on that basis, I would definitely think that you need other rooms that needs to be dealt with. So open plan living, in my book, is out. It is not something that we need to look at. You should have a minimum of 2 rooms downstairs available, apart from the kitchen, so that there is a breakout room for the family, and there is a breakout room so that either you've got a dining room or you've got a room where you have a family room, and then you've got a room where you can go and do your own thing, or you can have a private conversation on the phone, or you can do other things. But when open plan happens, yes, it's light, it's airy, and it gives you that sense of space, but practically it doesn't. And I cannot imagine that in this current climate that open plan is the thing. In fact, I know for a fact that so many people started to reinstate some of those walls back in during the pandemic period because it became completely uncomfortable to be able to have an open plan conversation. Hence, the home office world existed from the sheds at the back garden. You know, those things soared. Garden centres were filled with people who are looking to buy a 6 foot by 6 foot garden shed with its own, PowerPoints, etc., and down the bottom of the garden so that you can go and do your home office from there. So they did very, very well at that time. So I don't think that open plan is, and I don't think it really adds value, Paul, to be perfectly honest with you. It looks good, but it doesn't work well. It's a bit like, having one parking space in the front of the house, open plan living, one downstairs cloakroom, kitchen, whatever. I mean, if you go into the modern flats nowadays, those flats are all open plan because the kitchen and the living room is all in one. So you never seem to sort of escape it. Now you can understand that in a flat, but in a home, in a house, it's just not something that would be practical. Then there's the other side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is if you're cooking away, and you decided, as you would do, Paul, in your culinary skills, to do a very nice vegetarian biryani with all the masala that you're going to add to it. And then, of course, you're going to make sure that aromatic aroma of the masala is nicely spread throughout your property. So as they open the front door, they're going to go, wow, Paul's been cooking again. And perhaps even the neighbors. So that is another area that makes it a little tough for people to live into the one room. So that's where open plan living in my side will probably go. Now, if you bring in some of the cultural things from people like me as the Asian contributor and others, then open plan is just definitely a no-no. It just doesn't work. Often we want to extend so that we can add more rooms rather than detract. You might knock something at the back to make the kitchen area a bit bigger, but you're definitely going to keep a living room, a dining room, and other things there. So, yeah, I'm not really sure where the open plan would go, but it doesn't give you the space that you want.
I can understand that argument if you're going to open plan into the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen. That would make no sense. But if you've got a completely self-contained living room, surely the opportunity to take the dividing wall between the kitchen and the dining room down so that you've got them as one. Because one of the first things, of course, that was people found useful about them was if you were at home. It sounds it's going to sound a little sexist, but if one of the partners of the family were home cooking, they could keep an eye on the kids who were playing around the sort of dining area, and it was an ability to be able to see where they were whilst they were getting on with something. And you can see why people might want to sit while somebody's cooking. If you've got friends coming round for dinner, they can sit around the table and they can chat to the person who's doing the cooking at the same time. Whereas if you're in separate rooms, somebody's got to be isolated. So I think these are the reasons why it's popular, and certainly, the vast majority of people want it. So do you think that would be a sensible thing if there's a separate living room?
Yes, I'm not adverse to the open plan living of a dining stroke kitchen area amalgamated, because the best room that most people spend most of their time is in the kitchen, and a dining area, so that you're chatting, you can have a glass of wine, you're cooking, you've got your kids playing nearby, that part of it is fine. When I say that I'm adverse to open plan is when they knock the entire guts out of the whole downstairs and then expect everybody to be in the same room doing all those things. That is not a good open plan move. But an open plan move to extend the kitchen area with a dining area, which is 90% of where most people's home and heart is. The heart, they say, the heart of the kitchen, the heart of the house is the kitchen, and that's where most people spend. I mean, I've been to homes that have colossal sizes, anything between 7.5 to 10,000 square foot of a house. But most people, even in those massive, great mansion houses, live in the kitchen, dining room, living room area. It's that sort of 1/10 of the space that they actually live in. The rest of it, it just needs to be dusted and cleaned. But it looks good that we have all that sort of space. So that kind of open plan living, yes, definitely. But I was referring more to the fact that you take the guts out of the entire downstairs.
Sure. What about all of us? I think we've both got conservatories on our properties. So what about the fact that they're no longer considered to be essential part of the home? There seems to be people are knocking them down in favour of the bifold doors. So where do we go with that one?
Well, I think the conservatories came in, and for us certainly, the conservatory added a lot of things, and it really depends on what your views are and what your garden facilities are and so forth. So we enjoy the fact that our conservatory allows us to look over a decent sized garden, and that makes it work well for us. It also meant that it was another room, and by folding doors, yes, we can whack those across the back and bring the outdoors in and make the indoors out and all that kind of modern stuff. But you can do that with most things. I mean, last week, I think it was a week before, I can't remember, we were discussing the difference between orangeries and conservatories. And the fact is that they all create another room. And so when you think about, in our earlier part of this conversation about open plan living, and then on the other side, on the flip side, you're actually going to add an orangery or a conservatory. So you knock the guts out of a house, and then you say, "Oh, I need to another room because that's where it's going to be." So I think you got to sort of balance out exactly where that's going to go. And I think, conservatories are definitely still in. Okay, it might be a more posher version with orangeries, but it just means that we still need that other room.
I think into wrapping up this conversation and wrapping up this week's edition, Joe, it's probably important to stress the fact that do your research and get some expert advice before you do any of these things.
Absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, when you're in it, you don't see it. And you only see what you think is right. So there's no harm in getting a view. Agents will be happy to come round to your property, to give you a free market appraisal. And while they're there, you may as well pick their brains and say, I was thinking about doing this. What do you think about this? And so forth. And, listen to what they've got to say. But they are on the ground. They're right in front of you. So they would know what's going on. And based on that, you can then decide whether you want to get an architect in to add and take some, proper drawings to make sure you can submit them, or leave it. No, don't fix something that's not broke.
Sound advice as always, Joe. Thank you so much indeed for that. And I hope you enjoyed this special edition of Property Matters. We'll be back at the same time next Sunday, 10 a.m.